This is Ecclesia Militans Radio, a media arm of the Our Lady of Good Success mission in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Hosted by Tony LaRosa, fighting for the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, and to maintain the line of the saintly Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. Visit us at www.ecclesiamilitans.com for our archived radio programs and other information in promotion and defense of the Catholic faith. Prepare for battle. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ecclesia Militans Radio. I am your host, Tony LaRosa. Before we begin our show, let us start off with a Hail Mary in honor of Our Lady of Good Success. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to episode number 3, recorded on Monday, January the 2nd, 2017, in the year of our Lord. The title of this episode is A Refutation of a Catechetical Refutation. My friends, back in June of 2015, there was a conference held by His Excellency Bishop Richard Williamson in Mahopac, New York. And in that conference, he shocked the traditional world. How did he do that? Well, he actually gave permission to a lady who had asked him a question about attending the Novus Ordo Mass. He actually told her that given her circumstances, she could continue attending the Novus Ordo Mass. Now, naturally, this sent shockwaves in the traditional world, because one of the core fights, especially for the followers of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, was a rejection of the Mass, of the rejection wholesale of the new Mass. So what Bishop Williamson did was, by that statement, by that advice that he had given to the woman, was set back the traditional world, at least for the followers of the Archbishop, 30, 40 years. After that, there were many who were scrambling to defend His Excellency's comments. And it so happened that approximately a year later, in May 2016, Mr. Sean Johnson wrote a paper called A Catechetical Refutation. And in this refutation, amongst other things, he tried to show that His Excellency Bishop Williamson's advice to the woman was in conformity with the position of the Archbishop. Basically, his argument is that the new Mass, attendance at the new Mass, is not intrinsically evil. Rather, it's evil by circumstance. And he lists in this study two circumstances, two general ones, or two main ones. One is ignorance on the part of the person attending the new Mass. And the second one is extreme spiritual necessity. So thereby, by making the new Mass evil only by circumstance, he's able to defend Bishop Williamson because the circumstances under which the Lady of Mahapak was under could fit into the two circumstances I just mentioned. One, that she was ignorant regarding the evil of the new Mass, and two, she had a spiritual necessity to attend the Mass and receive Holy Communion. Later on in his paper, he tries to substantiate his claim that the new Mass, active attendance at the new Mass, I want to be very, very particular, very specific, that active attendance in the new Mass is not intrinsically evil by reason of its object, because the person attending the Mass simply has the object of Mass attendance and not Novus Ordo Mass attendance. This Mass attendance is what the person apprehends and wills. And since Mass attendance in itself is good, therefore the object of the act is good. Therefore, we must look, according to Mr. Johnson, to the circumstances to determine whether active attendance at a particular Novus Ordo Mass is evil or not. After the publication of Mr. Johnson's paper, many of those who were trying to defend Bishop Williamson took up this study of his as bulletproof, that it was an excellent paper, that someone had finally done a thorough theological, philosophical study to show that Bishop Williamson's words were in line with the Archbishop. Unfortunately, even some champions of Catholic tradition took up that banner and basically used his study for their own defense of Bishop Williamson. Several months later, in October 2016, I published a paper called A Refutation of a Catechetical Refutation, in which I tried to point out, and I believe I did successfully, the errors in Mr. Johnson's paper. Now, I want to be clear that Mr. Johnson's paper contained many defenses of various statements of Bishop Williamson. My paper focused on Bishop Williamson's advice to the Lady in Mahopac, New York, regarding attendance at the new Mass. I did not comment on many of the other theses that Mr. Johnson had presented in his paper. And basically, to go over briefly, what I had presented was basically, in terms of the object, I pointed out that the known and chosen object of the person performing the act is not always the true object that is actually being performed by that person. I'm not going to get into too many details. You can read my paper in response, and it goes into very much detail in that regard. But I basically put a bullet, many bullets actually, through the defense of Bishop Williamson by Sean Johnson in regards to attendance at the new Mass. In addition to attacking his proposition regarding the object, I also looked at the circumstances that he had presented. As I mentioned earlier, one of the circumstances was ignorance on part of the person attending the new Mass. And I pointed out in my paper that when you're analyzing a moral act, ignorance is not a circumstance. In a very broad sense, ignorance is a circumstance. That's true. But when you are analyzing a moral act, you must separate the subjective elements of that act, the subjective elements being knowledge or awareness of the evil of an act, and consent to performing that act. Those are the subjective elements. The objective elements are the object, that is the act that's actually being performed, the circumstances that surround that act, independent of the knowledge of the evil or consent towards that evil of the person performing the act, and the end for which the act is being performed. So the object, circumstances, and end are objective elements. They are known as the material elements of a human act, whereas the knowledge and consent are known as the subjective elements or the formal elements of a human act. So what Sean Johnson was basically doing was confounding the subjective and the objective elements. This is the problem, a key problem with his paper. And I put bullet holes in those as well. Now, the other circumstance that's, as I mentioned earlier, that Sean Johnson pointed out or mentioned in his paper was extreme spiritual necessity. Now, I do agree with Mr. Johnson that extreme spiritual necessity is to be considered an objective circumstance. It's part of the matter of the act. Whereas the ignorance is, contrary to Sean Johnson's thesis, the ignorance is a subjective element. Now, in regards to the objective circumstance of extreme spiritual necessity, I pointed out there that if we are going to use that extreme spiritual necessity as a true circumstance in regards to attending the new Mass, actively attending the new Mass, then why would that not apply to those who know or have some knowledge about the evil of the new Mass, such as those who attend the Society of St. Pius X Masses? Why can I not use extreme spiritual necessity to attend the Novus Ordo Mass? I know the new Mass is evil. I know there are problems with it, but if I am to consider that it's not intrinsically evil an act, then what is stopping me from using extreme spiritual necessity as a reason for attending the new Mass? Because Sean Johnson did not say that both ignorance and extreme spiritual necessity come together to allow one to attend the new Mass. No, he pointed that he said it was ignorance or extreme spiritual necessity. But Sean Johnson does not speak about this in his paper. This seeming, I don't want to say contradiction. It's not a contradiction, but this seeming oversight on his part. Furthermore, if he can prove me wrong, I more than welcome him to do so. But I don't recall or have ever heard of the church prior to Vatican II using extreme spiritual necessity as a circumstance that would allow one, for example, to attend a schismatic Orthodox liturgy for the sake of attending Mass and receiving Holy Communion. What I encourage you to do is to read my paper. It goes into a lot more detail in regards to my objections towards the points made by Sean Johnson in his paper. I basically, in my paper, defended the position that active attendance at the Novus Ordo Mass is indeed intrinsically evil. And I showed that this principle, this idea, this principle is within the declaration of fidelity to the positions of the Society of St. Pius X, formulated by the saintly Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre himself. In this formula, he has his seminarians who want to become priests of the Society of St. Pius X sign this document that contains various statements in regards to the positions of the Society of St. Pius X, and that these seminarians promise to adhere to them. The one of interest that I had pointed out was in regards to the new Mass. And it goes like this. I affirm, quote, I affirm that the new rite of Mass does not, it is true, formulate any heresy in an explicit manner, but that it departs in a striking manner overall as well as in detail from the Catholic theology of the Mass, and for this reason the new rite is in itself bad. In itself bad. And I get into more detail in my paper. That is why I shall never celebrate the Holy Mass according to this new rite, even if I am threatened with ecclesiastical sanctions. And I shall never advise anyone in a positive manner to take an active part in such a Mass. The key is, I shall never advise anyone in a positive manner to take an active part in such a Mass. That statement itself shows that a priest of the Society of St. Pius X shall never in a positive manner advise anyone to take an active part in the new Mass. And this is, in my paper, the main issue I try to show, that Bishop Williamson went against this by his advice to the lady in Mahobac, New York. Read the paper, read my paper, read his paper, read my paper. It goes into detail about that. Now, after Bishop Williamson had made these comments to the lady, I had written to him to clarify his position. And basically what I did was I sent him a proposition, and the proposition went something like this. Is the Novus Ordo Mass, as promulgated by Rome, intrinsically evil? And this was an email conversation going back and forth between Bishop Williamson and me. And he never directly answered in the affirmative or in the negative to my statement, to the proposition that I had put forth. He basically ended up saying to me that it's not a yes or no answer. I don't agree with that. I think he could have said just yes or no to that question. But anyways, I didn't get a clean answer from him. So it started to grow on me that he doesn't believe the new Mass is intrinsically evil. Now, with Sean Johnson's paper, it came out after some further evidence that came out prior to that in regards to this same issue about the new Mass being intrinsically evil. And that was a paper published, or a magazine, a monthly magazine published, called The Catholic Candle, of April 2016. And in this issue, the question was asked amongst the resistant bishop and the priests to affirm or deny the following proposition. Quote, "No one should ever attend the new Mass because it is inherently evil." End of quote. This was also, this proposition was sent to Bishop Williamson, and he had responded saying that basically he refuses to respond either way. So this even further made it clear to me, more and more clear, that Bishop Williamson does not believe that the new Mass is intrinsically evil. And this is contrary to many statements that he has said in the past. There is actually one conference he gave where he said that the new Mass is intrinsically evil, and it's basically very similar to a satanic Mass, and therefore always illegitimate. It's always illegitimate, he said. That clearly indicates to me that he believed, at least at one time, that the new Mass is intrinsically evil. As I said, this issue was published in April 2016. Sean Johnson's article defending Bishop Williamson did not come out until May 2016. Now, what Sean Johnson's article did do, which I appreciated in a way because it made me think more closely in regards to the proposition that I had earlier presented to Bishop Williamson, is that he made a distinction between the rite of Mass and active attendance at this rite of Mass. And he made the distinction that the rite of Mass is intrinsically evil, but active attendance is not. And I explained to you why he defended that active attendance is not. And you could read more in his paper. You can hear it from his own words. So recently, at the behest of a resistance priest, I decided to ask the question again, but in a more specific more particular way, given that what I had studied and wrote in my paper, and that is in regards to active attendance. So whereas before I just simply said to him, is the new Mass intrinsically evil, as promulgated by Rome? I was more specific, and I directed it towards active attendance. So I wrote to him, this is in November 2016, a couple of months ago. I wrote to him and asking him to affirm or deny the following proposition. And that is active attendance at the Novus Ordo Mass objectively and intrinsically evil act? First time I sent it, I did not get a response. I asked him, I believe a week later. I sent the same email, still no response. Then 1 or 2 weeks after that, a third time, I asked him, and still no response, and I have not received a response to this day. So, with all this, I am now very much convinced, and given some of the conferences also that he some of the words in his conferences in the United States recently, I believe it was September 2016, as well as comments made in the Ecclesia comments of his, various ones, I am convinced at this point that Bishop Williamson does not believe that active attendance at the Novus Ordo Mass is intrinsically evil. Sean Johnson also does not believe that Bishop Williamson believes that, because he tried to show that the object of Novus Ordo Mass attendance is simply Mass attendance, and that it's the circumstances that make that attendance evil. Now, in regards to responses to my paper, I have not as yet seen any serious objections to what I wrote. A friend of mine had published a thread on Cath Info, and on that thread he had linked to my paper, and quickly it was taken down and put at the back of another not exactly appropriate but somewhat related thread. A thread that, one of those threads that are 20, 30 pages long. So there wasn't much argumentation in objecting to what I wrote. And then recently, I myself, in the past few weeks, published the paper on Cath Info. And surprise, surprise, I was banned. It was also published on another forum called Archbishop Lefebvre 3.0. And there are some objections that were raised to my paper on that forum, but I really don't see them as substantial objections. For example, one post had spoken about the fact that I had equated active attendance at the Novus Ordo Mass to sacrilege. Sacrilege, we need to understand it as an intrinsically evil act, and therefore, by equating Novus Ordo Mass attendance to a sacrilege, then the attendance is intrinsically evil. And someone there had said that, well, communion in the hand, the practice of communion in the hand has changed over the centuries, whereas the church allowed it before and did not allow it after that time. And since the church first allowed and did not, it went from not being a sacrilege to being a sacrilege. Well, in a loose sense, if you want to use the term sacrilege in a very loose sense, that is dependent on what the church, the discipline of the church at any particular point in time. That's not the way I meant sacrilege. I made it clear that sacrilege, as I defined it, which it truly is an intrinsically evil act. It's an act that can never be justified, regardless of the circumstances. So, in regards to communion in the hand, we can say that strictly speaking, it is not a sacrilege. It's not proper to speak of it strictly as a sacrilege. Another objection, and I think this objection was completely a very poor application, was in regards to a situation where, for example, someone wants to steal, is determined to steal, let's say $100. And there's someone else who does not agree with that person stealing. And because the second person sees that the person who wants to steal is determined, he tries to mitigate the damage by trying to convince the thief, the one who wants to steal, to only steal, for example, $20. So this example was then applied to the advice that Bishop Williamson had given to this lady in Mahopac, New York. And I think that it's a misapplication. It doesn't go. Why? Well, in the example of the person stealing, it is clear that the person is determined to perform the act. The person who is trying to mitigate the damage to the act clearly does not agree that the act of stealing is right. All he's simply doing, he's trying to basically limit the damage. But he's not in any way agreeing or helping that person steal. But in the Bishop Williamson case, to the advice he gave to the lady in Mahopac, the lady was not determined to go to the Novus Ordo Mass. She was going, but she had come there to ask a question regarding the Novus Ordo Mass. And so she's coming there for advice. So Bishop Williamson clearly had the opportunity to tell her that she ought not to be going to the Novus Ordo Mass. What she decided to do after that, it's her responsibility. But if you hear the conference, you'll see that Bishop Williamson basically gave her permission to go to the new Mass. It wasn't a matter of someone being determined to do an intrinsically evil act and someone trying to mitigate and prevent great damage with that act. Rather, it was someone saying, okay, because of these circumstances, you can go to the new Mass as long as you're careful not to create scandal, as long as you're not. So the act itself, the act of going to the new Mass, Bishop Williamson did not have an issue with that. Did not have a big problem with that. He gave permission for her to go. Whereas the one stealing, the person is not agreeing with that person stealing. He's just trying to mitigate that person from doing extensive damage. So it's the two different situations. But this is what I've seen. This is the type of somersaults that I've seen, mental gymnastics that I've seen performed on those who are trying to defend Bishop Williamson. Now, it's unfortunate that these two websites, CathInfo and Archbishop Lefebvre Forum 3.0, claim to be faithful to the Archbishop. By their defense of Bishop Williamson, they are not being faithful to the Archbishop. CathInfo should change its model to say that it's a website dedicated to the defense of Bishop Williamson. And Archbishop Lefebvre 3.0 Forum should change its name to Bishop Williamson 1.0 Forum. My friends, as we start the new year, 2017, the 100th anniversary of the miracle of the sun at Fatima approaches, we can't let this go in regards to what has happened in the past year and a half with this assault on a core position of Archbishop Lefebvre and really any Catholic that's worthy of the name. We must reject the Novus Ordo Mass wholly and completely. And we must never advise in a positive manner for others to attend it. We must oppose this softening of Bishop Williamson in regards to active attendance in the new Mass. He's refused to recant despite repeated requests to do so. Unfortunately, many have jumped on trying to defend him, and by doing so, they've turned away from the Archbishop. As I said earlier, Bishop Williamson, by his comments, and by those who are defending his comments, have set us back 30, 40 years. This issue of active attendance at the Novus Ordo Mass should be a done deal. It's a closed issue. We must never attend it. It is an intrinsically evil act to attend the Novus Ordo Mass. We can never attend it ourselves, and we cannot advise others to do so. We cannot cooperate in their attendance. Regardless of the knowledge, the level of knowledge they have, or the ignorance that they have in regards to attendance, if we have an opportunity to present our position, then let's be clear about that position. No Novus Ordo Mass attendance. So, I hope that Mr. Johnson, those who have supported him, will take back his paper, admit the errors in that paper, and retract his position in support of Bishop Williamson's comments to the lady in Mahopac, New York. We must be faithful to the Archbishop because he was faithful to Catholic tradition. He is the modern day Saint Athanasius. If we really believe that, and given that the new Mass, attendance at the new Mass, is a core issue in our fight for Catholic tradition, we cannot let this go. We must continue to pray for Bishop Williamson, make requests for him to retract what he said, and not defend him, but make him see that we cannot accept his softening on the new Mass. What I'm saying, what I'm going to say now, I'm speaking on behalf of the council members of the Our Lady of Good Success Mission in Toronto, Canada. We have unanimously agreed that we will no longer host Bishop Williamson until he retracts his statements regarding the new Mass. And we have the support of others as well. I know that, for example, Father Raphael, Benedictine priest, monk down in now in Ecuador, agrees with us that we should no longer be attending his masses. We hate to say this, we hate to do this, but this issue is a core issue. We can't play with this issue. It's not a minor matter. If we accept Bishop Williamson's comments to the Lady Mahopac, and we defend that the Novus Ordo Mass or active attendance in Novus Ordo Mass is not intrinsically evil, then we can't call ourselves faithful followers of the Archbishop. We cannot. And I know there are those who will say, well, Bishop Williamson is doing a lot of good. He's doing more good than evil. There are many bishops and priests that we can say are doing more good than evil. It's not just simply a matter of quantity. It's also a matter of quality. So, defending Bishop Williamson by saying that, we don't agree. It's not acceptable. The new Mass issue is an issue of quality, and it's a serious issue. As I said, if we let go of this issue, and we accept that the active attendance Novus Ordo Mass is okay in certain circumstances, we may even lose the faith. I've always said, and people who know me, that if I ever said either of these two things, one, that active attendance Novus Ordo Mass is not intrinsically evil, or that I accept Vatican II in some way, to slap me in the face, that I know that I've sunk from the correct position. So knowing that and telling myself that over time and telling others, whether it's Bishop Williamson, whether it's someone else that we've always trusted, this point cannot be negotiable. It just can't be negotiable. So let us take 2017. Let us take our fight. Let us not give up. Let us not back down. Bishop Williamson's not backing down. His supporters are not backing down. We can't back down. We've got to carry forward the message of the Archbishop, the message of Catholic tradition in its entirety, hold and inviolate. And by doing so, we can truly call ourselves faithful followers of that great man of the Church, Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. God bless you. I wish you all a very blessed New Year. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking your precious time to join us today. Be sure to visit us at www.ecclesiamilitans.com for our archived radio programs and other information in promotion and defense of the Catholic faith. Until next time, we wish you the best.